My mother taught me how to ride a bike, how to balance a checkbook, and how to apologize when I was wrong. She never once, in 44 years, asked me for anything back. So when I tell you that the woman I married put her in a hospital bed, you have to understand, that wasn't just violence. That was theft. Someone tried to take the last good thing I had left of my father's memory, and she thought I'd let it go. Welcome to Dad's Pure Revenge. If you're new here, I'm glad you found us. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. Hit like if stories like this matter to you, and stick around, because what happened in that police station 18 minutes later is something I still think about every single day. My mother's name is Eleanor. She's 71, she's 5'2", and she has never in her life raised her voice at another human being. When my father died 9 years ago, she sold his fishing boat without telling anyone, and quietly paid off the last of my brother's community college tuition with the money. She never mentioned it. I found out from a bank statement I wasn't supposed to see. Every Sunday for as long as I can remember, she showed up at my house at 11 in the morning with a casserole dish covered in foil, and she never once called first, because she said a mother doesn't need an appointment to see her son. She kept a coffee can on her kitchen counter, an old Folgers can with the label peeled halfway off, and she dropped her spare change into it every night. It was for my daughter Nora's first car. She'd been doing it for 6 years. I only found out because Nora told me. My name is Grant Halloway. I'm 44. I manage logistics for a freight company in Spokane, Washington, and if I'm honest with you, and I told myself when I started telling this story that I would be, my flaw was that I let things sit. I'm a man who avoids the hard conversation. 3 years ago, my wife started finding reasons my mother couldn't come for Sunday dinner anymore. A headache, a scheduling conflict, a tone in her voice that told me not to push, and I didn't push. I told myself it was smoother that way. I told myself I was keeping the peace in my own house. I never once asked my wife, straight to her face, why the woman who raised me had gone from a weekly guest to someone we saw twice a year at holidays. That's on me. I own that. Thursday, June 11th, 5:27 in the evening. I was walking across the parking garage at work, keys already in my hand, when my phone rang, and the screen said, Mom. She was crying so hard I almost couldn't understand her. Grant, she said. Grant, I need you to come. Mom, what happened? Are you hurt? Camille came to the house. Her voice broke on my wife's name. She called me a crazy old hag, Grant. And then she had a bat, the one from Nora's softball bag. She hit me with it. My arm, my shoulder. I think she broke something. I stood in that parking garage for maybe 4 seconds not breathing. Where is she now? I said. Where's Camille right now? I don't know. She left. Ruth heard me screaming and came over. She called 911. Grant, there's blood on my kitchen floor. I was already running. I called Camille from the car. She picked up on the second ring, and her voice was so calm it stopped me cold. Your mother's being dramatic, she said. She fell. I didn't touch her. She said you hit her with a bat, Camille. She's 71 years old, and she exaggerates everything. You know that. A pause. You're not seriously taking her side on this without even talking to me first. I am talking to you first. I'm asking you what happened. Nothing happened that deserves this phone call, Grant. And then, flat, almost bored. Figure it out when you get home. She hung up. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I did. Figure it out. My mother was on her kitchen floor bleeding, and my wife told me to figure it out like I'd asked her where the extra paper towels were kept. The woman who found my mother is named Ruth Callahan. She's lived 2 houses down from my mom for 11 years. She's 68. She's got a bad hip and a worse knee, and she still walks over every single morning to check my mother's porch for the newspaper before Eleanor's even awake. Because Eleanor once mentioned she liked reading it with her coffee while it was still cool enough to hold the mug with both hands. Ruth leaves a small potted geranium on the porch rail every spring, Same red pot, has for years. When she heard my mother screaming through the kitchen window that evening, she didn't call me first. She didn't call anyone first except 911. Then she sat on that kitchen floor, held a dish towel against my mother's shoulder, and stayed on the phone with dispatch the entire 11 minutes it took the ambulance to arrive, repeating the same 4 words to my mother the whole time. "I'm right here, Eleanor. I'm right here, Eleanor." Over and over, like a heartbeat. By the time I got to St. Vincent's Memorial, my mother was already in a treatment room. Fractured clavicle, deep bruising across her forearm where she'd tried to block the swing, a cut above her eyebrow from where she'd hit the counter going down. She looked so small in that hospital gown. She grabbed my hand with her good arm, and the first thing she said to me, not "I'm scared," not "why would she do this?" The first thing she said was, "Is Nora okay?" Camille didn't go after Nora, did she? That's my mother, bleeding and worried about my daughter. A detective named Priya Ramanathan met me in the hallway outside the treatment room. She told me they already had a unit looking for Camille. She told me the bat had been recovered from the trunk of Camille's car, along with something that stopped me in my tracks. A folder, papers, my mother's name on some of them, deed information, a copy of my life insurance policy. I didn't understand it yet. Not fully. I just knew it made my stomach drop in a way the assault charge alone hadn't. The station called me at 6:52. They needed me to come in and give a statement. I told my mother I'd be back within the hour, and I drove there so fast I don't remember most of the streets I took. 18 minutes. That's how long it took from the moment I got that call to the moment I pushed open the doors of the Spokane Valley Police Station. I remember because I was staring at the clock on my dashboard the entire drive, watching the minutes climb, thinking about my mother's coffee can, thinking about the geranium on Ruth Callahan's porch rail, thinking about a marriage I'd stopped questioning 3 years ago because it was easier not to. I pushed the door open and the room went quiet. Not dramatic quiet, just a few officers glanced up, a woman at the front counter stopped mid-sentence, and the desk sergeant, a heavy-set man named Dale Prentice, who I later learned had been on the force for 22 years, looked up at me and his face went white. "Mr. Halloway," he said. "Sir, please, let me explain before you go back there." I stood still. "Explain what?" He came around the counter. "Your wife's here. She came in about 40 minutes ago, before we even had units out looking for her. She walked in on her own and told the intake officer that your mother attacked her first, that she acted in self-defense." I felt something go cold in my chest. There's no self-defense claim that survives a broken clavicle on a 71-year-old woman standing 5'2". Sergeant Prentice said, "We know that. The medical report backs your mother up completely, the neighbor's 911 call backs her up, and frankly, sir, this isn't the first time we've had a call out to your mother's address about your wife. 2 noise complaints last year that were really about shouting. A welfare check in March that your mother declined to press further on. We should have connected those dots sooner. That's on us. And I'm sorry." That's when it hit me. The folder in her trunk. The deed. The insurance policy. This hadn't started that afternoon. This had been building for longer than I wanted to admit, and I'd spent 3 years calling it keeping the peace while my wife was quietly circling something. I didn't raise my voice. "I want you to know that, because it matters to what happened next. I'd like to see her," I said. They walked me back. Camille was sitting in a small room with her arms crossed, mascara tracked down one cheek, and when she saw me, her whole face rearranged itself into something soft and wounded. "Grant, thank God. Tell them what your mother's like. Tell them how she's always disliked me, how she's always tried to come between us." "Camille." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "There's a folder in your trunk with my mother's deed paperwork and a copy of my life insurance policy. Why do you have that?" She stopped. For just a second before she rebuilt her face, I watched something behind her eyes go still and calculating, and I understood I was looking at a version of my wife I'd never actually met in 9 years of marriage. I was organizing our documents, she said. That's all. With my mother's deed in it. Camille, my mother's house isn't even in my name. She didn't have an answer for that, not one that held up. Her phone had been buzzing in the evidence bag on the table between us the whole time. I watched the screen light up. 11 missed calls from her sister. Then, over the next 2 days while everything unfolded, the arraignment, the restraining order, the conversation with my own lawyer, I watched that number keep climbing on my own phone as she tried to reach me. 11, 29, 34, 38 missed calls, and I didn't answer a single one, because I was done figuring things out on her timeline. Here's what I learned over the following weeks, piece by piece, mostly through paperwork instead of confrontation, because that's how the truth tends to arrive when you finally stop looking away from it. Camille had spoken to an estate attorney 8 months earlier about simplifying our finances, a joint trust that would have folded my mother's small savings account, which Eleanor had set up years ago with my name as backup signer for emergencies, into an account Camille would have had full access to. My mother had refused to sign the paperwork when Camille brought it to her over coffee back in February, framed as a favor to protect the family. That refusal, I believe now, is the real reason the visits stopped. My mother didn't make a scene. She just quietly said no, and quietly kept coming to Sunday dinner less and less, because she didn't want to put me in the middle of something she couldn't yet prove. I didn't need her to prove it anymore. I had a bat in an evidence locker and a folder full of intentions. I filed for divorce 11 days after that night at the station. I also sat down with my own attorney and rewrote my will, removed Camille as beneficiary on my life insurance, and set up a trust for Nora, with my mother named as trustee, until Nora turns 25. I added one more name to that trust as a secondary guardian, in case anything ever happened to both my mother and me. Ruth Callahan. She cried when I told her, said she didn't do any of it for a reward. I told her that's exactly why she was getting one. Camille was charged with second-degree assault. She took a plea, probation, mandatory anger management, a permanent restraining order that keeps her 1,000 feet from my mother's house. She never apologized to Eleanor. Not once. Not through a lawyer, not through a card, nothing. I used to think I needed that from her, some acknowledgement, some crack in the coldness. I don't anymore. Her remorse, or the absence of it, stopped being my responsibility to manage the day I stopped answering her calls. My mother's shoulder healed slower than the doctors hoped, but it healed. She's back to Sunday dinners now, 11 o'clock sharp, foil-covered casserole dish in her good arm. Ruth still walks her geranium pot out every spring and sets it on the porch rail without being asked. Nora's coffee can is still on the counter, and last month my mother told me, almost shy about it, that she started slipping in a little extra now that she doesn't have anyone telling her to be careful with her money. I don't feel triumphant about any of this. I feel clear. There's a difference, and it took me 44 years and one very bad phone call to learn it. I'm not waiting on an apology that isn't coming. I'm not circling back to a marriage that showed me exactly what it was willing to do when it thought no one was watching. I'm just here, on Sunday mornings, holding the door open for my mother before she even has to knock. If this story meant something to you, I want to ask you for something specific tonight. Not just a like, though I'd appreciate that too. I want you